Welcome back to the Film Feeder podcast. I'm Jack Martin.
And I'm Joe Warne.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode. But for those who may be watching on YouTube, you might have noticed something a little bit off right now. One of us only has hair, so I've I've gone the whole Bruce Willis now. I'm bald.
Is it more Bruce Willis or Bryan Cranston in Breaking
Ooh.
Bad? We'll let you be the judge of that.
This is very true. I mean, I am wearing green, so I could be an understated meth lab maker. So I don't know.
Yes.
But anyway,
Change your middle name to Heisenberg.
oh yeah, Jack Heisenberg Martin. Oh, I like that. And you'll be Joseph Jesse Warne. That actually works quite well for you.
Yes, science!
Yes, science, bitch. Yeah, I like it. But in fact, Breaking Bad, unfortunately, is not what we're talking about today. Well, Joe, why don't you lead the conversation? Because this is a topic that you suggested for this month.
Yes, that's right. I figured now that I've been here for a couple months, it's about time I start earning my keep and actually bring my own bring something forward to the table. And so compared to what we've done the previous 2 months, where we had we looked back at 2025 and we went through award season. This time we're going for something a bit more broad, but I feel like it's more one of the bigger trends that's happening in film at the moment over the last couple of months and going through into the rest of 2026. So I think it's safe to say, Jack, that these first few months of the year have been extremely busy
Very
for
much so, yeah.
for new releases. It feels like the studios have just not slowed down in terms of cramming every single week with at least 5 to 6 big new films. And I think it's honestly been kind of a bit to the detriment, but that's a whole other discussion. But with March, what in terms of the biggest new studio releases, we have Project Hail Mary, an adaptation of the novel by Andy Weir, who of course wrote The Martian back into which was turned into a film in 2015. Now, I think that still holds up. What today is one of Ridley Scott's absolute best, but we also have the makers of Paddington and Wonka returning with an adaptation of Enid Blyton's The Magic Faraway Tree, starring Andrew Garfield and Claire Foy, written by Simon Farnaby, one part of the Horrible Histories and Ghosts troupe, plus also Colleen Hoover returning to cinema screens with the latest adaptation of her novels, following It Ends With Us and Regretting You, reminders of him. And on top of all of that, when it comes to this year's Best Picture race, we have 3 high-profile book adaptations in the form of Frankenstein, Hamnet, and Train Dreams. And in addition, Netflix's biggest film so far this year has been People We Meet on Vacation, another book adaptation. I think you can see where I'm going with this. So, and even looking ahead to later this year, we have Christopher Nolan doing an adaptation of The Odyssey in the summer. We have the newest Hunger Games prequel, Sunrise on the Reaping. M. Night Shyamalan returning with an adaptation of Nicholas Sparks's Remain. So I figured, why not just do a whole episode on book adaptations? And also, as well, this is also coming off the hot off the heels of Wuthering Heights, which we'll have more to say about when we talk about our best and worst of February later on.
Yeah, no, I also want to add to that list. Speaking of Frankenstein, as of recording this, we've just had the release of The Bride, which technically isn't a book adaptation. It's more based on Bride of Frankenstein, which is obviously the sequel to the classic Boris Karloff Frankenstein adaptation. But obviously, Frankenstein is very much a part of the bride's identity, and in fact, Mary Shelley does factor into that movie quite a lot as well, quite surprisingly. We'll refrain from too many spoilers for The Bride, because I think that's a discussion possibly for next month's best and
Yeah.
worst, depending where that lands for us. But yeah, you're right. There are a lot of book adaptations, and look, book adaptations are nothing new in Hollywood. I mean, but Hollywood's been adapting books ever since it began. You know, like so. I mean, look at all the biggest films in history, like Harry Potter, Jurassic Park. You know, even you could even count comic books as books in some regard. So obviously the big ones like Avengers or Dark Knight. You know, all have been based on that kind of source material that people can just like pick up and read at any point. So, but you are right. There are quite a significant number of book adaptations coming out or are in the pipeline as well. Like you said, the M. Night Shyamalan, Nicholas Sparks thing. I mean, talk about a twist right there. I mean, who'd have thought those two would team up for a film of that regards? But focusing on March in particular, yes, we do have Project Hail Mary. Like you said, it is an adaptation of Andy Weir's novel. He also wrote The Martian, and whereas Martian was directed by Ridley Scott, this one is being directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who you might know as the directors of the Lego Movie, the Jump Street films, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and are also listed as producers and writers on the Spider-Verse series. So they're very high regarded filmmakers in their own right. And this is actually um, their first proper foray into sci-fi live action storytelling because, as we like to remember, they were originally hired to direct the Star Wars Han Solo film because before they
Of
were.
course.
Yes, before they were abruptly fired, like midway through production. I'm still uncertain as to the circumstances surrounding that. I mean, from what I hear, they were just kind of aiming for a completely different tone that Lucasfilm didn't want. So they were out and they were
Yeah.
replaced with Ron Howard, and Solo ended up being what it was. But going back to Project Hail Mary, it does fit alongside that with Magic Faraway Tree and reminders of him, you know, just because people, like you said, they do still read books even in this day and age, whether it's like the actual hardback or paperback covers or like ebooks on their tablets. So books are still very much a big thing in our society. And I mean, what better place to bring those visions, original stories to life than on the big screen, which is what we're seeing again with Project Hail Mary, which is probably the most high concept book adaptation coming out this month, if not the
Mm.
entire year, aside from the Odyssey, of course.
Yeah, and I feel like for studios, a lot of it, because they have that pre-established audience from people who have read the book, that's additional revenue that they're able to bring in. Besides the people who are like, oh, this is Ryan Gosling in space with an alien, and this looks interesting. But I also want to going back to Project Hail Mary for a second, it's worth also noting that not only is this Lord and Miller's first live action project since 22 Jump Street, actually, which was 12 years ago, but it's also written by Drew Goddard, who did also write the script for The Martian. Also, he helmed the first. He was showrunner for the first season of Netflix's Daredevil, and also wrote and directed Bad Times at the El Royale, which I think is one of the most underrated films of the entire 2010s decade. I love that film so much.
And also, don't forget the Cabin in the Woods. I know he wrote it.
Yes, of
Did he?
course.
Did he direct it as well? I can't remember. I
Yeah,
think he did. I think
yeah,
he did.
He
Yeah.
did direct it. It was a script co-written with Joss Whedon.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, because he directed Cabin in the Woods first, then he moved on to Bad Times at the El Royale. Again, a film I actually kind of liked, but I know it kind of performed pretty bad at the box office. But in recent years, it's definitely got a bit of a cult following. But yeah, no. But Drew, coming back to this, Drew Goddard, yeah, he is back in Andy Weir territory. They're both very The Martian and Project Hail Mary. They do seem very similar because they are. for the most part, one man shows. Like obviously, The Martian had Matt Damon alone on the planet on Mars, and this one, like you say, it's Ryan Gosling, but he's got a double act this time. He's got like a really cool looking alien that appears to be brought to life by a mixture of CGI and also puppetry, which is great to see in this day and age. I know that is lifted directly from the book as well, that relationship between him and the alien, who I believe is named Rocky. So it'll be great to see all of that come to fruition on the screen. Keep in mind, neither of us have seen Project Hail Mary at the time of recording, so we don't know whether, it's the masterpiece that many have predicted it to be, or it's the year's first biggest disappointment. But regardless, Project Hail Mary was made for the screen. It was adapted from the book, obviously, but it is being primed as a big theatrical release. And it's great. It's really encouraging to see a film like that on such a big scale, adapted from a book again, uh, be um, be greeted with such, massive hype around it. I think primarily because of who's directing it. Phil Lord and Chris Miller have their huge fan base, for obviously going back to the days of Clone High, or which they developed. I can't remember if they wrote it or directed it. Anyway, but they were a big part of that initial cult series. And then obviously going on to like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the Jump Street films, and the Lego Movie, which was phenomenal.
Mm.
It was fantastic, which surprised pretty much everyone at the time. But yeah, no, it's yeah, I'm excited to see Project Hail Mary. Is what I'm trying to say in a long roundabout way.
Absolutely. It's one of my most anticipated films of the entire year. But I think what I wanted to go on in regards to book adaptations is, I guess, like to chart back through our cinematic journeys, and like get an idea of like our relationship with book adaptations, and also just like books in general. So I guess so in terms of where you started, Jack. So like, what sort of books did you read when you were younger, mainly, and like what sort? And did you like? Was there anything that you saw where you read when you were younger, and then you saw the adaptation of it because you enjoyed the book?
Well, this may actually shock you, Joe, and it might shock some viewers, especially those who know me fairly well. I'm actually not that big of a reader, which I know is very quite surprising. It's very weird because I mean I've even since I was a kid I was much more of a visual person. Like I preferred watching a story play out in a film or a show or whatever, rather than like reading about it because I don't know, it's just there's something about like when it's on the page, like I do have difficulty like concentrating, like when I'm trying to visualize it in my head and trying to read the words at the same time. It can get all really jumbled up, and I do think that is possibly a part of my autism. It's possible. I don't know if I have it, but there's a possibility. It might be ADHD. But either way, there is some form of neurodivergence within me that kind of makes it a bit more difficult at me to absorb the written word, as it may be for others. I don't know if it's the same with you as well, but I do kind of lose my concentration when I'm a bit and when I'm reading something, and then I just kind of like go on about my day. But it really is. It can be difficult me. It can be difficult for me. But all that being said, I mean, it's not like I didn't read entirely. Like there were a bunch of stuff I did read as a young kid. Most of it was film related, so films, books that were turned into films, and other books which we maybe read in the class that didn't necessarily get film adaptations, but I still remember them to this day. So in terms of the ones that got turned into books, obviously Harry Potter was on the list very much so. It was the big rage at the time. I always remember being in like my school library, just whizzing through Prisoner of Azkaban, which I do think is not only the best book in the series, it's also the best film in the series as well. Obviously Alfonso Cuarón directed that adaptation after Chris Columbus stepped down. But yeah, so Prisoner of Azkaban was one that I distinctly remember, and then. Also, a bit later on, when I was in secondary school, we as a class read To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a classic piece of literature by Harper Lee, which was, of course, turned into the classic black and white film with Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch. It's a brilliant story. He's a lawyer. He's just like defending a person who is black who's accused of a horrific crime, and it's all told through the book. Anyway, it's told through the perspective of Atticus's young daughter, and yeah, it's a brilliant story and it's a great film as well. Like, I mean, there's even a very, very small role. I think the very first role of Robert Duvall, who very
Mm,
recently passed away. He doesn't say a word in the movie. It would kind of give it away to say who exactly he's playing, but he does play a major character in it. But Robert Duvall, he only shows up for a few minutes. He doesn't have any dialogue. It's all conveyed with his eyes, his body language, and stuff. And he's great. It really was like a little glimpse into the future as to the kind of brilliant actor he would go on to become, and is so fondly remembered now that he's unfortunately passed.
yeah.
But going back to Kill a Mockingbird, I mean, that was a book we definitely read uh, in in school, and it was obviously quite shocking because because the book does and the film as well does feature some quite shocking language, so shocking racial language. So that was kind of a little awkward to get through, but we did make it through in the end. But actually did want to harp upon a book that we also read at school, but I don't, to my knowledge, hasn't been turned into any kind of visual media, whether it's film or television. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this too. Have you ever heard of a series of books called Beaver Towers?
That is completely lost on me. No, I've not heard of that.
Yeah, so it was this weird, it was a strange book. There's like four of them, I seem to remember, and it was a very strange story. Like, there was this. It was about a boy who kind of like gets transported to this strange land. It's inhabited by animals, and I think the ones he communicates most with is like this beavers. I can't remember the exact. It's very strange. But I remember reading those in class, and there's just like it's I think it's made for little children basically. It was like I was like year four when we read it, so like I was about 9 or 10. But I distinctly remember reading those books in the class and thinking like, hearing them being read out, like I was thinking like, well, this could actually be quite an interesting film if someone actually had the guts to adapt it. But at the moment, I don't think anyone has. I mean, I'd correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it did get turned into something, and I just wasn't aware of it. But no, Beaver Towers was definitely one that I distinctly remember reading. But again, as far as I know, hasn't been turned into a movie or anything. So I
Well,
guess
who
the
knows? It might end up happening because, well, Pixar's newest animated film Hoppers has proven that there is very much a market for beavers at the moment, and who knows? With 1990s nostalgia, could very well end up being a thing now that Stranger Things has finally wrapped up. So who knows? We may just get a Beaver Towers adaptation at some point.
You hear that, Hollywood? Get on Beaver Towers. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's not that hard to find out. Oh dear. But I guess the question kind of falls on you as well. What kind of books did you read growing up that may or may not have turned into movies over the years?
I only really got into film in my teenage years. I just because of my autism, I very rarely had the attention span for for films when it was younger. I distinctly remember it took the first film I saw in cinemas actually was Pixar's Cars, and that was when I was 5 years old. I distinctly remember because I just wasn't like familiar with how Pixar films worked in cinemas. When they had the short that played before it, I genuinely thought that I'd walked into the wrong screening at first. Um, but anyway, yeah, so like because of that, like I didn't have the attention spent on for film at first, but books I very much did. I was a massive reader when I was younger, and I really wish that I keep telling myself always this will be the I always say this will be the year that I get back into reading, but because I just have to spend like so much time like if you're not watching something to see for a review, you're watching something for research, and it is life. This job is life consuming. This passion is life consuming one way or another. But very much when I was younger, yeah, I was like a massive reader. But like I never actually like grew up with like with the Harry Potter. I have never read the Harry Potter books in my life. I've only seen the film adaptations, but I feel like given the current mental state of J.K. Rowling, I really don't feel like I'm missing anything, to be completely honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll admit the J.K. Rowling stuff is deeply unfortunate because I mean, look, I'm not really the kind of person that kind of like actively avoids like particular media just because like there's a significant person behind it whose behavior is very problematic. But in this case, I do feel it is incredibly justified because that was some horrible stuff that she said, about trans people and all that stuff. So yeah, that whole it makes it very uncomfortable to kind of root for it, and I think it's why a lot of people aren't looking forward to that upcoming Harry Potter TV series.
Yeah, and the fact that she's also using like the funds from that she's still making from not just the books but anything Harry Potter related to fund legislation, it's just deeply, it's just deeply pathetic and sad. But this my last thing on the Harry Potter. My only thing that I can say on the Harry Potter reboot series as well is that the fact these books are nearly 30 years old, and just the fact that we're redoing them, but the own the fact that there's still people to this day being like, oh, this is a chance to finally get the spew plotline from Goblet of Fire right, that just find something else to be interested in. Find another hill to spend 25 years to die on, rather than one plot line for a book that had a pretty decent film adaptation and over 2 decades ago. But anyway, so the sorts of things that I read growing up are actually like two authors who have had like a number of film adaptations based on their work, and arguably two of the most notable cases of adaptations that tend to struggle with actually translating the source material properly. And firstly, there was Doctor Zeus, and I mean, honestly, I could write an entire university level assignment on the many failed adaptations of Doctor Seuss on film, like
Mhm.
the Cat in the Hat, which again, that's also getting a new adaptation towards the end of this year. Thankfully, it is animated though, so there's no chance of horrifying Mike Myers makeup this time. But you also had the two different versions of the Grinch. I will admit the Jim Carrey one is a guilty pleasure of mine, but the Illumination one like is absolutely terrible. Not to mention their version of the Lorax with the Tumblr sexy man Onceler.
Yeah, the Lorax was is probably my pick for least favorite one because at least Cat in the Hat for me anyway is fascinatingly bad. Like there are things about that movie which do not work is an understatement, but at least Cat in the Hat you can kind of look at that and kind of see like, oh, it's interesting to see how all these creative ideas could have worked, but ultimately didn't. Same with the Grinch. Like the Jim Carrey one, I do. It is a guilty pleasure for me as well, only because it is something that I did watch when I was younger. I did find it was pretty fun. I actually rewatched it over this last Christmas, and some of it kind of holds up, some of it doesn't. I think it's a very interestingly crafted film. But yeah, there are things about it which still don't work. And the Illumination Grinch, I mean, I can see why that it is definitely a much more streamlined version of the story. Like it is a bit more safe. But I do kind of I give it a slight pass only because I do think it is made for very very young children. Like my nephew actually, he just turned 3 and he spent the whole Christmas holiday just rewatching the Illumination Grinch over and over again. So I'm not going to deny him that pleasure. He's a child. It's made for him. That's who it's made
Oh,
for.
I mean,
But
more power to him, but when he grows up, he will soon understand just what an absolute menace, like the Jim Carrey version, or even just the one from the 60s,
mm,
Boris Karloff short,
yeah, the Chuck Jones
actually,
one, yeah.
yeah, actually was in comparison to just how sanitized the Illumination Grinch was, and like with the Lorax, like what is the best way that we could have marketed this film with this very anti-corporate, environmentally friendly message? I know, by shilling in a bunch of product placement and brand deals for companies who will ultimately help kill the environment.
Yeah, there was some massive oversight in the marketing department on the Lorax, but I do think the Lorax is the worst of those Seuss adaptations because it is just it is I just found it really painful to watch when I saw it. I've only seen it the once. It was only in cinemas, and I even watching it then I just felt so miserable watching it. It's just like my time feels like it's being slowly drained from me. I want this to stop. And again, even the Cat in the Hat has some kind of interestingly bad stuff about it, whereas the Lorax is just terrible.
Yeah,
Um,
like it's saying something that the only one that seems to have to have not been an absolute disaster was Horse and Hears a Who.
mm,
In terms of the films anyway, like I heard like good things about the Green Eggs and Ham Netflix series from a few years ago. But like Horse and Hears a Who is like the only one that wasn't a top to bottom disaster. But even then, just like the fact that that is probably like the most forgotten Blue Sky animated film out of like what was a very middle of the road average studios lineup.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Horton Hears a Who. I did like it when I saw it. I thought it was fine. Again, I haven't seen it in years. I do just obviously another Jim Carrey, Dr. Seuss movie. I just think obviously I remember like the animation style. I remember how it looked. It looked fine. It looked very close to the book. Obviously, I remember that weird random anime segment in the middle of it as well. Um, but there are things I do like about that. But yeah, like you said, in terms of future ones, Dr. Seuss, obviously there's a new Cat in the Hat coming out. It was meant to come out earlier this year, but I think it's been pushed back to November now. So I
Yeah.
think to capitalize more on the Thanksgiving crowd. But
Plus,
there is,
also, there's the fact that Hoppers was meant to come out. I think the week after the Cat in the Hat was originally meant to release. And I
yeah.
think like just the fact that like again the release schedule has been so crowded so far this year, like with so many releases cannibalizing each other because they're only able to spend like a couple weeks in cinemas at most. So like that is like one of the few bits of like actually smart programming that I've seen so far this year. But yeah, just like with all these Dr. Seuss adaptations, like I feel like it's very telling that like the source material is so short as is that like the things that are most remembered about the film adaptations are all the random bullshit that they choose to put in just to stretch them out to feature length, like the Cat in the Hat shilling for for Universal Studios, cha-ching, or the anime references in Horton Hears a Who. The fact that like for the Illumination Grinch they got Tyler the Creator of all people to do the songs for it. Like yeah, like I just don't think that Dr. Seuss is suited to the big screen format. TV, fine. Musicals, sure, why not? But I just yeah, it is even live action animated. I just don't think they work at all.
Which makes you kind of wonder how, because obviously there's a new version of Oh, the Places You'll Go scheduled as well. I think that's John M. Chu directing, and I think
Mm,
Ariana Grande is among the cast for that as well. Yeah, I don't know much about Oh, the Places You'll Go, but they're trying to make it into a film somehow. Will it be good? Will it be bad? Time will tell. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Dr. Seuss in general. I mean, they are such thin material. They are really short stories. Like you can be over and done with in less than 5 minutes just reading it to someone or reading it yourself. So yeah, I do think it is a massive challenge to bring it to the big screen to really kind of give it like this typical 3 act structure, and most don't really land it because again you're just kind of like stretching out material that never needed to be stretched out in the first place. Like it's a challenge. It's an uphill battle. Most don't make it up, but you get one or two that at least make it closer to the top than others, and that's
mm,
where I put Horton Hears a Who quite frankly. But
yeah.
yeah, but no, in terms of Dr. Seuss adaptations, yeah, it's very hit or miss, emphasis on miss.
And that's also, I think that is was largely true as well for the other big author who I tend to read a lot of when I was younger, and that was Roald Dahl. So
Mm.
who has also had a very spotty track record when it comes to film adaptations. I think the big one is of course is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which I I have a very interesting relationship with the film incarnations of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And that is like when I was young, that is I didn't really like either the Gene Wilder or the Johnny Depp incarnations when I was younger because I will fully brand myself as a bit of an idiot child who didn't really understand adaptation when I was when I was quite younger. I'm the sort of kid who also didn't who it took me forever to watch Star Wars because I didn't understand the concept of the prequel trilogy, and like it just didn't make sense to me why 1, 2, and 3 came out after 4, 5, and 6 and looked so much more modern as a result. But and I could go anyway. My relationship with Star Wars could be a whole episode in and of itself. But anyway, but like with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I was very much like a book purist when like I had like the original book was like an all time favorite for me when I was so it just didn't compute in my head like why they would have to change elements like for the like not including all of the grandparents, for instance, or changing the squirrels for Veruca Salt's segments of the trip into geese, or not to mention as well just the entire segment with the fizzing lifting tricks, like expanding that out and making it such a core component of of the ending. Yeah, it just didn't compute in young Joe's head. But I will fully admit I was wrong. I did because when decided to rewatch Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in the run up to when Wonka came out, and there is I think it is wonderful. There is simply like very few films that capture that sense of pure imagination, pardon the terrible pun, as that one. And like, even though like Doll famously like didn't like some of the changes that it made, I still feel like as an adaptation, like as a film on its own merit, it is just like absolutely spectacular.
I'm kind of I was always in the boat even as a kid, just I watched the Gene Wilder version and I actually kind of had nightmares from it. Not even the weird tunnel sequence, but I mean just more the fact that, it is kind of a slasher movie if you really think about it. It is like you never see these kids again after they like they get sucked in the tube or they turn massive like a blueberry or are shrunk down or like whatever happens to Veruca Salt when she falls down that pit. You never see them again, and I think that's something really messed up about that, and I really kind of dug it for that.
But on the other end of the scale, you have the Tim Burton Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which for the most part, it does like largely stick to more of like the finer details of the original book. But at the same time, like that takes some big swings in regards to again, like its ending and like the things that it does specifically with Wonka and his relationship with his Count Dooku dentist father, and like that even when I was young, like I that is something I just never got the point of. Like that has always felt like for me like Tim Burton just like completely hijacking the source material to make it a vessel for his own issues and trauma.
Well, the interesting thing about the Tim Burton Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is that because, yeah, it is technically closer to the original Roald Dahl book, but I think it's the one that people tend to forget about the most. Like, they always go back to the Gene Wilder one, which is technically a little bit further from the book. Like you said, in terms of the certain leaps that it does and with its storytelling. Like Slugworth, for example, being a major character in the film. There's other threats, but it is like there is such a much more whimsical charm to the Gene Wilder one. Like I think there is such a I think innocence is the wrong word because again, it is a slasher film but with kids. But I think there's more of a appeal to that one, whereas the Tim Burton one, yeah, like it's a lot drabber, like in its cinematography. Like the stuff in the Chocolate Factory isn't quite as whimsical as one would imagine it would be. Even just, all the stuff with like the Oompa Loompas. Like, I mean, you remember how the original songs go in the Willy Wonka version, way more than the ones in the Tim Burton one, which are lifted directly from the Roald Dahl book. And it's weird because I do think, I mean, honestly, I do think the Gene Wilder one is a better film anyway because it has much more of a cohesiveness to it. Like you know where it begins. We know when you know where it begins, you know where it ends, all that sort of stuff, and you don't really get that as much with the Tim Burton one. Again,
Yeah,
the big thing really kind of revolves around, like you said, Christopher Lee as his dentist father. All that, yeah, you didn't really need the daddy issues whole thing with Willy Wonka. I mean, even Wonka, which just came out like a few years ago. I mean, it was all about his origin story, but I mean, yeah, there is parent stuff involved in it, but it wasn't like a massive focus. It didn't define the character as it did
mm,
with the Johnny Depp one. But
yeah. The Tim Burton one, it's a Tim Burton film, which also happens to be an adaptation of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I think that's its biggest problem. But I think, like, with Roald Dahl, I feel like the one director who I think kind of was able to make massive changes, but also, like, have it very much work as an adaptation was Wes Anderson with Fantastic Mr. Fox. Because again, like that's a film I still remember. I saw that in cinemas when it came out in 2009. And like, even though there were things about it that when I was young, like it bothered me in terms of things that it changed, I do remember like still liking it, like as a film. And like my appreciation for it has only grown over time as I have become like as I became more of a fan of Wes Anderson as a filmmaker.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is one that I have a personal relationship with as well. I it was one of the few books I actually did read as a kid. I remember my granddad would usually read it to us when we were on like little camping trips and stuff. So I do have fond memories of reading the book. And yeah, the film I remember at the time it got very it made audiences quite perplexed because I think a lot of them weren't entirely familiar with Wes Anderson's style. So seeing that with something like Fantastic Mr. Fox, I think it did initially put a lot of people off, but I think has definitely grown as a cult favorite among a lot of
Yeah,
people.
I think
Um,
it's saying something about Wes Anderson, like his talent as a filmmaker, that he's able to take this like very like English, like very quaint source material and make it feel so natural when he brings in actors like George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Willem Dafoe as just the most flamboyantly evil little freaky little rat man to ever grace the silver screen. And yeah, the fact that it does end up working in the end.
And also, speaking of Wes Anderson, Roald Dahl, and Rats, let's keep in mind that Wes Anderson, just a few years ago, also delivered a bunch of shorts that were also based on Roald Dahl's works, more like short stories. So they were all on Netflix, and they include like the wonderful story of Henry Sugar, which a lot of people don't realize Wes Anderson won his first Oscar for.
Yes, I was just going to mention that actually. And like those shorts were really good to be fair. Like Poison, especially, is like such an Wes Anderson short. Like the fact that it actually you have shaky cam in a Wes Anderson project, like the last thing you'd expect from Mr. Symmetrical Framing.
Yeah, and there's also the slight bit of stop motion in the one with the rat, which is what the one I mentioned earlier.
The rat catcher.
Rat catcher, yeah. I mean, there's a little stop motion bit with the actual rat and all that sort of stuff is very Wes Anderson. Like you said, the symmetrical framing, it's all there. But yeah, and in certain ones, like you said, Poison, yeah, it does kind of go for a bit more of a handheld thing, which he has done in a few other films before. I distinctly remember he did it for a scene in French Dispatch, and I think he also did one in Darjeeling Limited. I can't remember if he did it for Rushmore or Royal Tenenbaums, one of those earlier films. But I mean, Wes Anderson's not above stepping out of his usual symmetrical comfort zone anyway. But yeah, you're all right. Like in terms of Roald Dahl adaptations, yeah, they Wes Anderson has made at least two of the most memorable ones in recent memory. But also let's also give a little shout out to Danny DeVito for bringing to
Mm,
life his quite messed up version of Matilda, which again that was a film I never read the book as a kid, but I definitely saw the Danny DeVito one with Mara Wilson in the title role, and that was a real revered childhood classic of mine. I remember
yeah.
really enjoying like all just the chaos of it all. I remember it was quite dark in places, just how mean and ugly a lot of the cinematography was in terms of how Danny DeVito directed it. It was, and Pam Ferris as Trunchbull is iconic. Like
Yeah.
she is such a great villain, and so that
Although I
was
will also vouch for Emma Thompson as Miss Trunchbull in the recent adaptation of Matilda the musical that
yeah.
came out a few years ago. I think just like the prosthetics that were used to make her look into the Olympic hammer thrower was just like really incredible. Like I mean, for like you have Pam Ferris for our generation, but I feel like Emma Thompson like is definitely going to be scaring like this current generation of kids for many more years to come.
Oh, absolutely. I was actually about to mention the recent musical version because obviously, I mean, that's another example of a Roald Dahl property being adapted into another format. In this case, the stage musical, and it working very well. Like the musical Matilda, in and of itself, is actually very good. Like the songs are really catchy, they're very cleverly written, and they're performed very well as well. And the film I felt really captured that a lot. And
Mm,
I actually really do like the recent Matilda one. I mean, again, it has isn't quite as visually distinctive as the Danny DeVito one, but there's still a lot to really enjoy. Not just the songs, not even just Emma Thompson as Trunchbull, but also Alicia Weir. I think is great as Matilda in this, and I really like that she's kind of gotten a career now of. Just kind of becoming like a star in her own right in films like
mm,
Abigail or appearing opposite Olivia Colman and future Oscar winner Jessie Buckley as the daughter in Wicked Little Letters. It's great to see that come about because she was so good in 2022 Matilda. But again, it's weird because it'll be interesting to see how both of those kind of compare further down the line because. Going back to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, yeah, I mean, when the Tim Burton version came out in 2005, people saw it, people seemed to like it fair enough, but then a few years went by, and then people started to gravitate toward the Gene Wilder one again, and I'm interested to see what will happen in terms of that with Matilda, both versions, the recent musical one and the one from the 90s. Like, will
mm.
people gravitate toward the musical one? Because I mean, the musical is still very popular. It's still going on in the West End, but like, will people gravitate more towards that or the quite rather sinister 90s version? It'll be very interesting to see where audiences go in that regard. But yeah, in terms of overall Roald Dahl things, I know there's other adaptations out there, the BFG, the Spielberg one, also the animated version from the 80s, I think. And also there's also two versions of The Witches as well, which have had varying degrees of success. But I never really read The Witches. It's never really been a story that I'm particularly fond of, even when I did read it eventually. I am familiar with others like Danny the Champion of the World. I think was turned into a TV special or something. I don't think it's been a film. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but
No, the one that I was really into as a kid that I think the one that I hope never gets adapted, not only just because of my own nostalgia for it, but also because of just how batshit of a book it actually is
I hope,
George's Marvelous
yes,
Medicine.
George's Marvelous Medicine. I love that book. That was probably my favorite of the Roald Dahl ones. I just loved reading that one. Like you said, it is just that I don't even know how that would work as a film, if at all. Like, it's again, it is kind of like Dr. Seuss in that regard. It is very light material, and it is such a messed up story when you really think about it. It's just like this would kind of give kids nightmares if this was made
Mm,
into a film today. And you know what? Funny enough, I would like to see that be adapted into a stage musical. Funnily enough, like I want to see how they pull certain things off. Which, for those who know the story of George's Marvelous Medicine, I think you know what I'm talking about already.
mm.
How certain characters turn out. So it'd be very interesting to see how, if at all, that's replicated on the stage as opposed to film, which I think might be a bit more tricky.
I also wanted to like approach this from the angle of a reviewer, like how do we tackle films like this where there is a pre-established fan base going into this who is loyal to certain aspects of it, which I think has especially been highlighted recently with Wuthering Heights. I'm just going to keep foreshadowing it until we get to the February roundup. But Jack, do you feel that like for you, do you often like try to read the source material first, or at least familiarize yourself with something when it comes to something like this, like not just book adaptations, but yeah, just like generally.
So for book adaptations, I tend not to read the source material because, like I said, my attention span often goes out the window anyway. But I always try and approach films like that have been adapted from like a book or a game or any other kind of source material. I really do try and approach it just from how it is as a film. Like
Mm.
I that's how I often go into film because I mean the majority of films released nowadays are adapted from something, and more often than not, I'm unfamiliar with the source material other than maybe reading like a brief summary of it on Wikipedia or something. But other than that, I don't really tend to think about the book as while I'm reading it, while I'm watching it, because I want it to kind of see how it stands as a film. Like, I mean, some of my favorite films are based on pre-existing material. Like The Green Mile, I think is a very good example of this. Now, The Green Mile is a Stephen King adaptation, and honestly, if we were getting to Stephen King adaptations, we'd be here well beyond
Yeah.
our time limit. So let's save it for that another time. But The Green Mile in particular, I know that is based on the book. I know. From what I hear, the book is very similar to how the film is. It's very faithful in that regard, but I only ever think of the film when I see it because one, I'm watching it, and two, I think it is a fantastically made film. I think Frank Darabont is a brilliant director. He's a great writer. He really clearly adores these characters, this world, of the prison cells, or like Death Row, The Green Mile, all that sort of stuff. There is such love to these characters that is given by Frank Darabont from Stephen King's books, and he really has a way of making you really emotionally empathize with them. Like how not just even Green Mile, but also Frank Darabont's other Stephen King adaptation, arguably the most famous one, Shawshank Redemption. Because Shawshank Redemption, again, adapted from a very short Stephen King story, but adapted in a way where it really makes you feel so emotionally engaged. Like you feel such a sense of euphoria in those final scenes, and it is so brilliantly done. And again, that is something that I do not think of when I think of like the fact that it's adapted from a book. Like I want that emotional experience on the screen, and more often than not, especially with those two examples, I do get that. But looking beyond Stephen King adaptations, like you also have like some of the most famous films based on books like Lord of the Rings. Now, Lord of
Which
the
are my
Rings,
all-time favorite films for the record.
hell yes. I mean, Return of the King is one of my favorite films of all time. Um, but Lord of the Rings, I mean, J.R.R. Tolkien is a very difficult author to read. Like, I mean,
Mm.
I tried reading The Hobbit a lot of times when I was younger, the keyword being tried, because I couldn't even get through like the first few chapters of The Hobbit. Like, it was such a convoluted kind of overly complex writing style that Tolkien applies, that it makes it very difficult to read, let alone, visualize in your mind, which is again where I think Peter Jackson is so good at bringing those to life, also making it its own thing, and much so more so with Lord of the Rings than The Hobbit. And I think the Hobbit films, for what they are, I think they're fine. Like I get the criticisms about them. I don't think they needed to be three films, let alone two, like they were originally planned. But I get why, people aren't as enamored with them as they are with Lord of the Rings. But just focusing purely on Lord of the Rings, I mean, that in and of itself is a massive task to undertake. And what Peter Jackson does with all three films, and especially Return of the King, in my opinion, close second is Fellowship, and Two Towers is third, but they're all fantastic films. But in terms of that, I mean, looking at Return of the King, that is a an incredible storytelling achievement, just visually, as well. All the stuff that happens, let's say with Minas Tirith, the big battle that goes on there. You feel when they come over the hills and the end, when they're just marching into like that army of orcs, like it is such an epic moment. And I feel that to read that on the page, it wouldn't have the same impact as it would when I was seeing it on the screen, if in any of that makes sense whatsoever.
Don't worry, it does make sense. I am glad that you mentioned Stephen King earlier because I was actually going to use one of his more recent adaptations to like explain my approach. That being The Life of Chuck, where like for me, I feel like for the most part, I normally take the same approach as you. I try and judge things on their own terms without like having any baggage go into it because if I do, like I will also profess I am like a big theatre nut as well and I am still to this day burnt by the adaptation of Dear Evan Hansen. Just like that was genuinely, I think, talk about completely missing what was actually good about the source material and only exemplifying its faults. But last year, I did end up reading Stephen King's The Life of Chuck before the film adaptation came out because I was intrigued by the whole backwards nature of its structure, and I was like, okay, I think if I read this first, then I will have a better idea of what I'm getting myself into, and it will be easier for me to get on the film's wavelength, as it was, and like understand what it's trying to go for. So I did. So I did read The Life of Chuck. I read it. I read it while I was like away at a music festival. Like it's only like 100 pages, so like I got through it way quicker than I really wanted to. But I was just like so captivated with like the way that King describes it and visualizes uh, his world. And like, yeah, like that, having that knowledge going in, I think like really like helped me like properly like fall in love with Life of Chuck because I know that it had quite a like a largely positive reception, but also like quite a few divisive responsive. It's but yeah, like it's one of those films that like it is a very faithful and like true adaptation to the book. I think like it exemplifies like why Mike Flanagan in like with likes of Gerald's Game, he has proven himself to be such a natural fit for King's material.
Yeah, yeah, I think Mike Flanagan, yeah, he is like Frank Darabont, he is a very he's a very generous filmmaker in the sense that he clearly loves the material. He loves King's worlds. He loves bringing them to life. As we've seen in like in the life of Chuck, and also Gerald's Game as well, and also I think there was another one he did, wasn't there? Like another Stephen King adaptation. Anyway, but also no, yeah, I'm talking about
Doctor Sleep.
Doctor Sleep. That was it. Yes, that was the other one. Yeah, so he is very good at bringing to life those kind of versions of King's stories, but also doing it in a way where it's visually engaging as much as it is to possibly read. And Doctor Sleep actually does lead into another major talking point when it comes to book adaptations and the faithfulness surrounding that is, of course, The Shining. So, The Shining, I think it's well known by this point that Stephen King famously hated Stanley Kubrick's version, and to a point where he actually oversaw like a much more faithful mini series. But again,
Where the
just like
scariest thing about that miniseries was the hedges.
yeah, the hedges. There's a CGI lion hedges and a croquet mat. It was scary. But one of my point is like just like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory next to Tim Burton's one, and also the two Matildas. I mean, people are gravitating more towards the ones that aren't necessarily faithful adaptations, but are just kind of doing their own thing. Like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is a brilliant film for one, and you don't even need to have read the book in order to enjoy it. You can just kind of go into it and just experiences it as a this weird cerebral horror. Whereas, it was the same with like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You go in and you can enjoy the whimsy of it, and with Matilda, you can also appreciate the vision that Danny DeVito brought to that one as well. So, what I'm getting at is that, hold on, sorry, I'll start again. What there seems to be like this drive toward original approaches to adapted stories, if that makes sense.
I think for me, like, I don't think an adaptation necessarily needs to be faithful to be good. I think The Shining has like very much as an example of that. But I think also to like branch out a bit when you look at things like in terms of like Golden Age Marvel MCU adaptations. I think like with a character like Thanos especially, I think the reason why his portrayal works so well on screen, I think, is the fact that it makes a big deviation from his comics depiction by removing the fact that his motivation, the reason that he's trying to wipe out half the universe in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline in the comics is so that he can win over his crush, which is the cosmic embodiment of death. Which, I mean, that's not necessarily something that most audiences are able to not understand, let alone identify with. So I feel like the way that they reworked Thanos' motivations, trying to portray him as what he believes as altruistic, despite being like completely misguided in that approach. I think, yeah, like I think that is like an example of something like making like quite big changes from the source material and actually like having it work out better than it in some instances.
Yeah, I mean, just look at things like Blade Runner, for instance, which was adapted from Philip K. Dick's story, and that is very much its own identity. You know, even just the change of name, like Blade Runner from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or whatever it was called. But yeah, just all these kind of big adaptations have really kind of gone in their own direction, and they've therefore been much more memorable because those are the newer elements that people seem to recognize. They take the filmmakers take the basis of the original story on the page and really kind of mold it into something that's more falls more within their vision, but also honors the original storytelling that was originally adapted from. So yeah, I do think that there's an interesting argument to be made there. Like you said, like books don't necessarily need to be faithful in order to be good. They just need to be good, basically.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I think like if you're able to find a new angle on quite beloved, like long-standing source material, then I think that's in some cases that's all you need. Like that's why I think for me, like Greta Gerwig's Little Women is like one of my all-time like favorite book adaptations. Like the way that she uses like the non-linear structure to like make the contrast between just the happiest memories of the girls' lives between like the present of the adult timeline and especially when it comes to how it depicts Beth and her illness as that gradually worsens. I think that is like such a smart and well, yeah, just such a beautiful decision to like to put those timelines in contrast with each other. So yeah, I feel yeah, I'm very much of the opinion like be pragmatic if you have to, but also like maintain the spirit of what it is that made people fall in love with that source material for the first place. But if you need to, don't be afraid to like chuck things out that don't work. Like I mean, Die Hard is like one of the best films of all time. It's like based on a book. Like, but I would be hard pressed to find people who actually remember that Die Hard is actually like a book adaptation. Um, but yeah, like I at the end of the day, like a good film is a good film regardless of where it comes from. And yeah, I think so long as these films are resonating with audience members, I think that's what's most important at the end of the day.
yeah, and to bring it all the way back to Project Hail Mary. I mean, look, I don't know much about the book itself. I haven't read it, but have you read Project Hail Mary?
I haven't read Project Hail Mary. No, in fact, full disclosure, it is on my list though. I'm going to read it after I have seen the film adaptation. You'll be more likely to get me reading Project Hail Mary than it is Colleen Hoover. The films are all that I can bring myself to subject myself to with her.
Fair enough, but what I'm getting at with Project Hail Mary in particular is that, like we said, I mean, it's a good film is a good film regardless, and I think bringing in filmmakers like Phil Lord and Christopher Miller who have established that kind of chaotic but also very heartfelt storytelling method, which they brought to the Lego Movie and the Spider-Verse films, all that sort of stuff, and bringing it into what is a very crowd-pleasing story that Andy Weir originally wrote. And from what it looks like from the trailers as well, they really have established a strong visual identity for it as well. Greg Fraser is the cinematographer on it. He also did Dune. He also did the Batman. He's very good at what he does, and what he brings to this visually, I think, will help it really kind of etch itself into people's memories when they watch it, which is something you don't really get from the book. You can certainly visualize it, but nothing will ever really kind of replicate that feeling of seeing something like all the imagery in that trailer, for instance. Just etching into your mind and really kind of creating this visual emotional roller coaster. And again, neither of us have seen Project Hail Mary by the time we're recording this, but I really do hope it is a good film at the very least, because it's a good story, it's got good people involved in it, and the hype surrounding it is real. Like, I do feel that there is a significant weight behind it, and yeah, I just hope that people respond to it as well as they have some of the other adaptations that we've mentioned in this episode, because it's, I mean, you can adapt a film as faithfully or as unfaithfully as you want, but at the end of the day, if your vision is worth remolding a bunch of stuff, then I'd say go for it.
Wise words to end this segment on.
Well, actually, I have even wiser words to end it on, because I also want to state on here on this podcast for the record that I myself am hoping to write a book very soon.
Oh ho 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 ho.
Yeah, and now it's not going to be a fiction book. So I mean, I don't think I have the creative mindset for that, but I want to write about well, it will be about film because obviously, but I want to specifically write about autism and neurodivergence in film. Now, both Joe and I have made it very clear a bunch of times, including once or twice in this very episode, that we are autistic, we are on the spectrum, and film is our passion. And autism is not very well represented in cinema. I mean, you have like a basic examples. So you have like Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, for instance, and you have like Sheldon Cooper in The Big Bang Theory, just going into television, like The Good Doctor, all
Or
that sort of stuff.
or more recently, train wrecks like Sia's Music.
Yes, or that will get a serious bollocking in my soon to be written novel, not novel but book. Anyway, point is, there is so much that I think the world still needs to understand about not just autism but neurodivergence, and I really do think that this past situation with the BAFTAs has really kind of made that apparent. For those who need reminding, there was John Davidson, who is the focus of the film I Swear and has Tourette's, has which of course causes him to shout out involuntary tics as a form of his condition. And unfortunately, when actors Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo were on stage, he unfortunately blurted out a very bad racial term, and the fallout from that, because again, he did not mean it, he did not want to say it, but unfortunately, his condition meant that he could and he did. So I think the severe backlash that he has faced, people calling him racist, people saying he shouldn't have been invited in the first place, just like everything surrounding that. I mean, there was also the discomfort as well that unfortunately Michael B. Jordan, Delroy Lindo, and other people of color in that particular environment felt when such a horrific word was being mentioned. I think just the backlash surrounding that really does, it really has opened the floodgates in terms of people really still do not understand Tourette's or autism or ADHD, all these things,
Yes,
and
like
a,
they claim to understand it when it is like wrapped up in a cozy little biopic package, but you present an actual example of disability and how it affects people in real life, and then their true colors are put on full display. I just it's the whole situation has just been an absolute mess, and it's entirely the blame should entirely fall at the BAFTAs and the BBC's feet.
oh
The
yeah,
BAFTAs
absolutely.
for not putting enough precautions in place to accommodate Davidson and Jordan, Lindo, and people of color in the audience, but also on the BBC for not censoring it out for the television broadcast, despite the 2 hour delay from the ceremony, despite them making sure to remove a mention from the Akinola Davis Jr., director of My Father's Shadow, in his acceptance speech for calling for a free Palestine. Like the BBC's priorities are clearly in order there.
It's an utter mess of a situation, and I really, I mean, I was thinking of writing this book anyway, but that this particular event has really made me want to write it even more because I think this is something that people need to know about. I think this is, and I think there is no better way to examine something like neurodivergence, autism, and stuff. I think there's no better way to do it through the medium of film. Because I do think that there are absolutely a lot of things within cinema that can help explain certain conditions, certain ways of thinking, and that is what I want to actively write about, while also bringing in examples from my own story, growing up with autism, and how that's affected me throughout my life as well. And Joe, you've very kindly offered to help brainstorm ideas on it as well. So that's very kind of you. I want to put that on record as well. But also, keep in mind, this is not something I'm actively writing at the moment. I haven't even started writing it yet, but I do really want to make a start very soon. And if anyone is listening or watching and wants to see me write about this sort of stuff, who do also think that they would love to have something like this in existence, do let me know. Post a comment or whatnot, and I will certainly take that feedback into account. But yeah, while we were talking about books and the relationships with film, I felt this would be a good opportunity to bring up those kind of intentions. So very near future, look out for it. Working title. I am leaning towards going full R word, and I mean that exactly as it says. Because obviously we all know the scene in Tropic Thunder where
Mm.
they're talking about all the performances where actors have kind of used neurodivergence, disabilities, learning disabilities, all that stuff to gain awards attention, like Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump, Dustin Hoffman, Rayman, Sean Penn, I Am Sam, all of these just to cynically kind of like enter the awards game. And of course, the R word is used a lot in that. It is a problematic word. It's a word that I never use, but I want to, in a sense, kind of reclaim it by using it for the title. Again, it could very well change. Publishers might not want to accept something that has that particular title. So, yeah, they could. You could look at a more sanitized title further down the line. But right now, I'm choosing to call it "Going Full R Word," exactly that R dash word. So anyway, that's my plug for a book that isn't even existing yet. So hopefully I will be able to write it at some point over the next a couple of years or so, and when it does, you'll be everyone who is listening and watching will surely be the first to hear about it.
Oh, well, no, there is nothing shameless about that plug whatsoever, I think.
Well, after all of that, I think it's now time for our brand new regular portion of the show where we kind of look back over the last month and really determine what our best and worst films of that month were. So we're talking about February now. So this was a month where like the last of the awards contenders were starting to come out. So just getting out in time for the BAFTAs and stuff. So there
Mm.
are a couple of maybe five-star films which may have been released. I might have seen during the film festival, which got released in February. So I'm not actually. I don't think I'm going to count those because I think I usually go off like if they were released like the previous year, but are released this year, then I'm not entirely sure that it counts for February of this year. I want to give more newer releases more of a chance. So and unfortunately, that does mean that Sarat, which I gave a five-star review to, unfortunately isn't my pick of the month for February. But I think both of us are going to be in agreement with this when we say that our favorite film of February was indeed Send Help.
Yes, that is right. Like honestly, and I'm so happy to be saying that because yeah, like to have a new Sam Raimi project in the year 2026, which is just Sam Raimi in every sense of those two words, is just absolutely wonderful.
It really is. I love watching this movie because, I mean, like I said, it is Sam Raimi to a T, but it's also him doing a lot of things that he hasn't necessarily done before, at least not to this extreme. Like, he's got the survival story, like the Castaway kind of thing going on for him. He's also got like elements of like romantic comedy in there, and then just before unleashing his usual ball of insanity, where it's like the bloodiest and most snottiest ball hunt of all time, or all the stuff that happens in the third act, which I won't give away here, but needless to say, it's pretty wild. And I had a great time with this movie. I felt it was entertaining as hell. I think Rachel McAdams is brilliantly cast as this very mousy office worker who suddenly becomes more self-assured and much more adept to her survivalist instincts. Like whereas Dylan O'Brien's a great foil. Like he goes from he's this very believable douchebag boss where he's obviously like got a lot of broy mentality, but also he does come across as quite human. In some cases, you do
Hmm.
actually empathize with him to in certain situations. But yeah, no, it's a great double pairing, but it's a very Sam Raimi. He is the true star of this, and it's great to see him kind of back at this kind of level of insanity, and it's just like I said, just a wonder to behold in this day and age.
Oh, 100%. I think one of my favorite like experiences of this year so far was after I'd seen it the first time. I took a couple of my friends who basically knew nothing about it. I took them to see it. When they went in blind, and I was just having the best time watching their reactions to just the sheer insanity of it all. Like, I mean, it is only like a month old, so we will refrain from discussing spoilers. But there's one bit involving the sharpening of a knife and what Rachel McAdams intends to do with it to Dylan O'Brien that is just so delightfully sadistic, and you just find yourself wondering throughout the whole scene, are they actually going to go there? And you just the further it gets into it, just the more I found myself just cackling with glee. Just yeah, like absolutely. It is just such a joy to have Sam Raimi back. And speaking of Dylan O'Brien, I also did I did want to briefly mention Twinless because that also finally got released in the UK this month. It got a really tiny release because, again, there's just been so much out this month. But I had to travel all the way to Cardiff just to be able to see it. But it was so worth doing it because it's a very different performance that he gives to his one in Send Out Help. But he is also like absolutely terrific in it. Like I feel, yeah, like he's really come a long way, I think, since his days on the Maze Runner, Dylan O'Brien.
Yeah, I know he's definitely kind of gone from like discount Logan Lerman to just becoming his own actor in his own right, own movie star credentials. Yeah, no, there was a time, especially when like Maze Runner came out, where I looked at him and was just like, wow, he looks very strikingly almost like a clone to Logan Lerman. So I just always referred to him as discount Logan Lerman, which, but obviously. Now he's kind of branched out a lot in films like Twinless, in films like Send Help, both of which I actually highly recommend. And they are I mean they are great vehicles for Dylan O'Brien to really kind of settle into that kind of like movie star position that he's always been lingering towards, but hadn't quite found the right project to lead. And with Twinless and now Send Help, alongside Rachel McAdams in the latter and in the form in Send Help and James Sweeney in Twinless. He's really kind of finding his groove, and I'm starting to like him more and more as an actor. You know, with all the things that he's doing. And
Yeah.
let's also not forget he was also Dan Aykroyd in Jason Reitman's Saturday Night, which I actually feel is a very underrated film. I write that very highly too.
Oh yeah. Like it's been a very diverse month when it's come to great films. Like in terms of late release awards contenders that we've had finally making over, I really loved If I Had Legs I'd Kick You. That is a five-star film from me. Just like like a waking, anxiety-inducing nightmare. With like Rose Byrne, I think she would be my choice for Best Actress this year. But you also have the truly wonderful Little Amelie or the character of Rain, which would be my choice for best animated feature, like a film that really captures the wonder and beauty of like being young when you believe that like you are the center of your own universe, but you have so much growing to do. Plus also The Secret Agent, from which very glad to see Wagner Moura make it into Best Actor at the Oscars and very deserving based off the performance he gives in it. My Father's Shadow, a deserving winner of best debut for a British writer, director, and actor at the BAFTAs. Fantastic work there from Akinola Davis Jr. and Sope Derisu. And also Wasteman, which my friend Nathan Hardy, part of the We Are Parable team over in Bristol, hosted a preview of. Great film. David Johnson, Tom Blythe, a pairing I want to see loads more of going forward. Yeah, there's been some great stuff in February, but there's also been some stinkers, and let's get into those. Jack, what is your worst film of February?
Well, this is where we're going to differ somewhat because your pick, and I think we all know what it is because you've been teasing it all this
Yes,
episode.
but let's save it for a moment because
Yes, yeah.
we have to talk about the film which made you go bold.
Yes, that's right. It filmed so bad it forced me to finally shave this off. I just couldn't take it anymore. My hair couldn't take it anymore. I even did that in my video review for this. I'll just post that right here for you to hear or see, depending on how you're watching. The following movie is so bad it did this to my hair. And yeah. So I had a lot of fun doing that. But yeah, I am of course talking about The Strangers Chapter 3, the third in Rennie Harlin's trilogy of let's call them spin-offs of the classic slasher from home invasion film from 2008.
But the thing is, though, can you even call it a classic? There's been five of these Strangers films now because of thanks to this new trilogy. There was the original in 2008. There was Pray at Night in 2018, and now I I want to meet someone who is a fan of The Strangers. I want to know what that person looks like, because like what does that say about you if you are a die-hard fan of the Strangers, like, and especially with The Strangers Chapter 3, which, as you said yourself, I have, for the record, I haven't seen The Strangers Chapter 3 because I've seen none of the other ones. But you described it as the most, this could have been an email trilogy to ever exist.
And I stand by that statement. This is a totally pointless trilogy, the most pointless since probably the Hobbit trilogy, but even that had more of a point. But in terms of fans of the series, I completely understand being a fan of the first Strangers movie, which I do think is a genuinely good movie, very suspenseful, quite creepy. And there is some good stuff about Prey at Night as well. It kind of goes into more of a B movie route. It was more enjoyable. That's Johannes Roberts, who also recently made Primate,
Which was
but
decent, to be fair.
which was decent. Yeah, yeah, that is a decent. He's a good filmmaker, Johannes Roberts. But Rennie Harlin, who some people will know for like classic action movies like Cliffhanger and was it Last Boy Scout he did as well?
He did Die Hard 2,
He did Die Hard 2, that's correct. So he's very well known in the action circle, but
and
lately,
also The Legend of Hercules,
oh, of course, yeah, with Scott Adkins,
Kellen Lutz from Twilight.
of course. But yeah, so something obviously happened to Rennie Harlan because he's gone from making stuff like Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger, and now is making stuff like The Strangest Chapters 1, 2, and 3, all of which, seriously, I mean, I stand by like this could have been an email, like literally all the way through these three films. There's nothing happening in any of them other than all the stuff with like the rehashed stuff from the original, and there's also this weird like Halloween 2 kind of quote unquote homage in the second one, which goes nowhere, and then this one it tries to tie it all together but does an absolutely shit job at it. Like there is watching it, it feels like your time has been wasted throughout all these three films because there's nothing being said, there's nothing to do, nothing interesting with the characters, nothing interesting with the wider story. Even Richard Brake, who's in it for a handful of scenes, he can do nothing to this. This is an absolute train wreck of a concept for a trilogy. I mean, because if you're making a trilogy based on The Strangers, fine. Just make sure that, there's something worthwhile in each and every one of them, because if you're not going to do that, then what is even the point? So I really disliked it. I felt like my time was just wasted. And I'm really glad that there's no Strangers Chapter 4 in the works, so that Rennie Harlin can just go on and do something that's much more worth his time, much more worth the audience's time. It's just a dull experience through and through. Would not recommend it even to fans of the original Strangers films. No, that was a one-star film for me. And not quite the half-star lowest score I give, because like I will say, it is nice seeing Richard Brake and stuff, so that was really kind of what carried me through. But other than that, skip this Strangers trilogy all the way through. Like I said, the most this could have been an email trilogy in recent movie history.
Well, I will definitely be taking that advice, because with the trilogy, something funny I wanted to point out is, like, in Western Supermare, where I'm from, um, we didn't actually get The Strangers Chapter 3 in cinemas. We got parts 1 and 2, but the week the Chapter 3 came out, that was also the same week that Send Help was out. So clearly we knew which film was actually worth prioritizing. And I see this as the universe balancing itself out, because we didn't get no other choice down here. So that was a bit of karmic justice, I think, especially after Mercy and Return to Silent Hill as well.
Yeah, no, you kind of lucked out with that. I mean, I don't know if Strangers Chapter 3 is worse than Return to Silent Hill. But I think Return to Silent Hill at least had some ambition, whereas The Strangers, neither of these three films did. So yeah, I think it is slightly more of irritating watch than Return to Silent Hill, which is still terrible, mind you.
Well, it is time for me to finally stop keeping you all in suspense. Oh wait, I lied because there were a few stinkers on my end that um barely made the list. They're all horror themed as well because I personally really wasn't a big fan of Whistle, but like that's because I do think like there were some things I did admire about it. I did like the performances from Daphne Keane and Sophie Neillis, although part of that might just be my enjoyment of heated rivalry still bleeding over. But I just found it to be a film which like I feel like Corin Hardy, like he's one of those filmmakers that just it focused so much on like if like when it wasn't being a hot topic Final Destination, it it went way too far in terms of like the obnoxious jump scares and the sound mixing and everything. It's a film that like made me active that actively turned me against it while I was watching in terms of how much of a bad sensory experience it was for me, but it wasn't quite enough to be my worst film of the month. And I will say very little about this next one, but Scream 7 as well. It's the film that Paramount deserves to have, given the circumstances in which they fired Melissa Barrera for rightfully speaking up against the genocide in Palestine. And considering that they outbought Netflix to own Warner Brothers, it's like they're not really saved; they're just under new management. In to quote Megamind, and yeah, Scream 7. It talk about a franchise just completely flushing all of its goodwill down the toilet, but that's a film that is too pathetic for me to make fun of. So that's also not my choice for the worst film in February. That is Wuthering Heights, the new adaptation of Emily Bronte's classic, written and directed by Emerald Fennell. Oh boy,
Yeah,
I yeah, I to say I really didn't like this film, which I'm disappointed by because I personally really liked Promising Young Woman and Saltburn. I will admit there were a few things about Saltburn that did like rub me the wrong way, but I did like really appreciate like the just the vibe that it was going for and everything. And hey, like Murder on the Dance Floor is now back in public consciousness thanks to it, and that is something I'll always appreciate it for. But with Wuthering Heights, it's a film where like the mission statement was to recapture how she felt reading the book at age 14. And I'll give her credit. She did that, but it's just not Wuthering Heights because it's an adaptation which completely strips the book of the elements that like drive the central conflict in regards to the cast whitewashing the casting of Heathcliff, which like isn't a new thing because like he's been played by like Laurence Olivier, Tom Hardy over the years, but like the fact that the fact that in the original novel, the fact that there is so much there is the ethnic ambiguity surrounding Heathcliff, and like the fact that his race is such a big part of why he is looked down upon. To not have that element, it just feels like like it's just a massive missing of the point of of the source material. But also as well, it's a film which is trying so hard to be provocative and shocking that it just ends up being nothing. Pillion is a more provocative and risque film, and that's a film which has Alexander Skarsgård and Harry Melling wrestling in leather jock straps. Um, but yeah, and like there's just like like it like I think it's not a completely irredeemable film on account of like how good the production design is, like the Charlie XCX soundtrack. I think it would have worked more like as a visual novel than no, not a visual novel, a visual album or like a music video, as it would have then it would have been being like a film adaptation in its own right. But I just feel like Emerald Fennell is just like so disconnected like from the reality of like how to depict people that aren't like from the upper class, like the way in which she frames the an early encounter of like Kathy observing the servants like engaging in sexual acts like in the barn, the way that it's made out as this like horrific, like disgusting, repulsive act, and yet the way in which the rich people do, like the Lintons and everything, engage in like sorts of behaviors is so much more lavish and decadent. Yeah, it just really like rubbed me the wrong way while watching it, and it's boring. It's just like, how can you make an adaptation of Wuthering Heights where I'm just checked out by the hour and a half mark of a like 2 hour, 20-minute film? So yeah, Wuthering Heights, easily my choice for like the worst film of February, but still not the worst film of the year so far, because Mercy exists, and also Shelter with Jason Statham, which doesn't count because it was a January film that I didn't see until February. But it's lucky that I saw it in that it skips out, because that was also just a nothing film.
Wuthering Heights for me, I wasn't a big fan of it either. Not quite to the extent that you weren't, but I think there are things to admire about it just from a aesthetic standpoint. I think the production design is very lavish. The costume designs as well, cinematography, I think is gorgeous. It does give the feel of like a Vogue magazine cover shoot. Like all these sorts of images you'd find just sprawling on like the front page or something that you'd find in news agents in terms of the fashion section. I think it is a very I think what Emerald Fennell was going for here is a very old-fashioned style, because it is very, it has like a lot, obviously filmed on a lot of sets and a lot of extravagant like costumes, production design, all that stuff. Right down to the casting of Heathcliff. Like I said, like you said, like Laurence Olivier has played Heathcliff in the past, and that is a very, very racially ambiguous character. So I can see where she's going in that regard, but like you, I don't think it works because it felt too much like Emerald Fennell was just kind of like just doing too much of her own thing. Like, I think
Yeah,
she definitely fancies herself a provocateur, as we've seen in Promising Young Woman and especially Saltburn. And I think a lot of that can be represented in how I can't remember the character's name, but the one that Alison Oliver plays.
Isabella.
Isabella, yes, that's it. I haven't read Wuthering Heights, the book, but I do know that in the book, Isabella is a character who ends up being a victim of spousal abuse, and in the book, I do understand is very shocking and very dark and everything. Whereas in the film, it's played up much more in the sense that it's this sort of like BDSM relationship. Speaking of Pillion, that actually does have a bit more of a edgier approach to that kind of relationship, because in the film Wuthering Heights, it's depicted as much more like it's still abuse to an extent, but it's framed much more like she's into it a lot more, like all the pet play and stuff like that. She's like walking on all fours like a dog and all that sort of stuff, and that has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way as well, and understandably so, especially in the context of the original book. But as someone who didn't read the book, as someone who didn't really know what this character goes through in that original source material, I just saw it as like, okay, this is like Emerald Fennell trying to outdo her own stuff in Saltburn, like doing this really edgy, like all the stuff you see in that film, like Barry Keoghan like slurping the bath water, all that sort of stuff. It just felt like she was just trying to do that, but not without any real kind of. It didn't feel necessary. It didn't feel right for this kind of source material. So it felt like it was just a bit too much of this is what I want to do and not in exactly what Wuthering Heights is. Again, I think I'm fumbling my
Mm.
words here, but I did admire the production values of it. I do think it is a very handsomely made film, and but it doesn't really work for me as a whole. And funnily enough, that's actually how I feel about The Bride, which was just released in cinemas and kind of has a similar trajectory. It is a very auteur-driven piece, lots of lavish production values by a female filmmaker with a vision who that clearly wants to convey said vision, but obviously has too much to say and doesn't quite know how to say it in the best way. And it kind of feels very convoluted, very jumbled. But I do respect the approach, I do respect the vision, but it doesn't entirely work as an actual film. And as you can say that about The Bride, and you can also say that about Wuthering Heights as well, just from my point of view.
We'll have more to say on The Bride next time, but yeah, I mean, I will give credit. Like, I think like Alison Oliver, like, is putting in the best performance out of everyone in the cast in Wuthering Heights as Isabella. But yeah, like it's a big swing film that unfortunately just was like a complete miss for me. But yeah, looking ahead to March, we have plenty of big swing films, some of which we've actually seen already, not just because of like when we're recording this, but also just because of like preview screenings. There's a lot of late release films that are finally making their way over to the UK this year. Some of which including Dead Man's Wire, the new film from Gus Van Sant, starring Bill Skarsgård and Dacre Montgomery from Stranger Things. Both of us have seen this one already, and spoilers, it's getting a high recommendation from both of us.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I saw it and I enjoyed it quite a bit, but more on that next time.
Oh yeah. Plus, we also have Arco finally making its way over to the UK, which is nominated for best animated feature as well. Plus, Paolo Sorrentino, director of the Oscar-winning The Great Beauty, returning with his new film La Grazia later in March, the same day as Project Hail Mary, in fact, which is also which again we said we've had quite a lot to say about that already, along with The Magic Faraway Tree and Reminders of Him. I will be reviewing that, so pray for me. But also Ready or Not 2, Here I Come, which is honestly, I am so excited for this. I rewatched the original Ready or Not fairly recently. It was my first time seeing it I saw it in cinemas, in fact. I've forgotten just how great of a horror film that is. And I think it's a better, considering that its directors would go on to do Scream 5 and 6, it's a better, like, horror film than Scream 7 if you're wanting something to watch, if you're boycotting Scream 7.
I agree. I really enjoyed the hell out of Ready or Not. I'm cautiously optimistic about the sequel because as we've seen with Megan 2.0 or Muthrigan 2.0 as I like to call it, as we've seen with that, horror sequels can tend to not be quite as provocative or even as memorable as the original. But I'm hopeful because again, it is the same directors. It's Radio Silence directing it, those duo.
Yeah. Plus, in terms of the cast that they've added, I mean, you have Catherine Newton as the sister to Samara Weaving's character, but also Sarah Michelle Gellar, Elijah Wood, David Cronenberg. So it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun at the very least, which I can also say about looks to be the case for They Will Kill You, starring Zazie Beetz.
Yeah, that one is it's interesting that they're releasing that one just a week after Ready or Not because they have very similar plots. I mean, this one They Will Kill You. It's adopting more of like a structure not too dissimilar to The Raid, but it's definitely that similar like people hunting a woman who fights back kind of thing. But They Will Kill You does look quite deranged. It does come from a filmmaker whose work I have seen. So it's a Russian filmmaker called Kirill Sokolov, who did a film a few years ago, released during 2020, the pandemic year, called Why Don't You Just Die? He's a Russian film, but I remember that being quite outstanding. It is a very Tarantino-esque kind of non-linear structure. But I did enjoy that one, so I have a little bit of high hopes for They Will Kill You as well, which is
Yeah.
his English language debut.
Mm.
Anyway, but other than that, we have How to Make a Killing, starring Glenn Powell, which has already been released in the States, but is finally making its UK debut over here. In cinemas right now, we also have The Bride and Hoppers, which are worth checking out in very different senses.
Oh yeah, like it's very likely that Hoppers might be my film of the month for March. I really got a lot out of it. I would say that it's I think it's the Pixar film that I felt the most passionately about, which isn't to say that I didn't dislike films like Inside Out 2 or Luca, but it's the film that I have been the most into since Soul, I think. So yeah, that Hoppers does get like a strong recommendation from me. But we also have One Last Deal with Dougie Dyer coming out. Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, which is in cinemas at the moment, will be releasing on Netflix fairly soon after the fact. Yeah, it's a very busy time for March, and again, like a lot of films all out in close proximity, but a lot of like interesting stuff as well.
And we will be here to cover most of it in the next month's episode, which we'll get to as and when. But also stay tuned for later on this month when we will be recording a very special Patreon exclusive episode, which is all about our reactions to the Oscar winners. We did an episode last month on all the nominations, and now we're going to be reacting to the winners, not in real time, but we will be talking about them at length
Yes, plus also the ceremony itself,
and the
seeing what
ceremony itself.
shenanigans Conan O'Brien and company get up to.
Will someone be slapped on stage? Will there be a wrong winner read again?
Will
We'll have
John
to find
Cena
out.
come out with nothing but an envelope?
All of these things are within the realm of possibility, but we will be talking about that in our Patreon exclusive. So if you go to patreon.com/filmfeeder, you can sign up to become a member and you can watch or listen to the episode right there and then. But yeah, aside from that, I think that's a good place to end this episode. So thank you as ever, Joe, for joining me. And
Oh, thank you, Jack. Thank you for letting me like lead the discussion on this one.
yeah, no, it sounds like you really thought this through. And apologies if there's been a bit of rambling on both our ends. I think we're just nervous to kind of talk about subjects that we're obviously passionate about. And hopefully, it was as good a listening or watching experience as it was for us to talk. So, with all that in mind, it's been great to catch up with you as well. So, and we'll see you next month. So, bye for now.
Bye for now.
Hey, you've made it to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for sticking around. Please like and subscribe on whichever platform you may be listening on. Make sure that you're following Film Feeder on all our social media channels, the links and handles to which are all listed in the episode description. And do consider supporting Film Feeder either on our Patreon or Ko-fi pages, the links to which are also in the description, where even the smallest donation, either monthly or as a one-off, will be an enormous contribution towards helping a hard-working creative like myself. Finally, don't forget to visit the Film Feeder website at filmfeeder.co.uk, where I post regular written reviews and weekly movie menus that round up all the latest movies coming to cinemas, streaming and on demand here in the UK. Until next time, I'm Jack Martin, your film chef extraordinaire, whetting your appetite for film each and every month. Bye for now.